Welcome back. So, what was your reaction to your diagnosis? Um, to be honest, I didn't have that strong of a reaction. Um, when she first told me, I just pretty much was like, okay. I think because of, how things progressed, like at that point, I sort of knew. I still was keeping hope that it wasn't, but I sort of knew. So my reaction wasn't that harsh. It's just that when, like, my friend who was helping me at the grocery store, she asked, like, if we're still going to go over my house. And I was like, I don't really want you to come over anymore. And she's like, what happened? And so I was like, while we were in the store, my doctor called me and it is cancer. So when I told her, like, I cried a little, especially because, like, up to that point, like, I wasn't really talking to her about it because, she has a history of it in her family. And I kind of wanted to be sensitive to that. So, it was kind of, for me, like, I didn't want to overly react in front of her either because it was kind of like, damn, like, this is really happening. Like, that, you know? So that was it. Like, I cried a little bit and then I went home and then I called my parents, obviously, and I told them. And they were like, don't worry, we'll get through this. Like, you know, just, just don't stress pretty much. And I also didn't want to stress because, they say that stress kind of makes it worse. Like, so I called the guy and I was like, can I come over? Because I don't really want to be alone right now while I'm dealing with this. And I ended up telling him, like, it came back that it was. So I just went there and I slept over. And then I just went to work the next day like a normal day. And that was my reaction. Um, the next question is, how did you process your diagnosis? I think I processed it as best as someone in my age group can. Initially, I didn't really want to tell people, but I started to because, like, friends would be like, don't hold it in, just let it out. And to be honest, the more I did, like, let it out and talk about it, the better I felt. Like, it felt kind of like a release that I wasn't really holding this in so much anymore. So, to me, that was kind of good. So I started like tweeting about it more. I wrote my blog post because at that point, unbeknownst to me, like I was kind of tweeting vague things about like checking on your health, and people were wondering but didn't ask me, but asked other people like, "Oh, what's going on with Zena? Like, why is she tweeting these kind of things?" So it did feel kind of good to put it out there in the atmosphere and not be so closed off about it anymore. So that's one way that I kind of processed it. I also started journaling a lot more. Like, I would journal, but I would journal so inconsistently, like once a year, once every couple months, stuff like that. But now I honestly journal every few days. Like, I really started journaling a lot. And that's pretty much how I processed it. I've just like kind of had this mindset, like, we just gotta get through this and be done with it, and that's it. And I think that helps me get through it a lot. So that's been it. The next question is, what's your mental health journey been like through this? And like I say, I don't feel like it has been really impacted, but another part of me kind of feels like when everything is all over, I might end up with like PTSD about it because I've just, like I said, been soldiering through. Like, I talked about it when I felt like I needed to talk about it. Like, I let it out. I let the people that were in my life know. But like, I haven't been super like, oh, always wanting to talk about it all the time. Like, me and my mom probably talk about it the most because she is my caretaker and she's with me all the time. And then me and my best friend. But other than that, like, when people ask, like, I'm usually like, oh, it's good, it's good. So For now, my mental health hasn't been impacted, but I do think that that will come later, and I am probably actually going to go into therapy when it's all over and done with. Um, the next one is, how did it impact your friendships and relationships? Personally, I don't think it really has that much. Friendships, at least. I think that, my friendships are all pretty much the same. I think that we don't really talk as much because I am not in the space to talk about it that much. And I think that sometimes friends don't really know how to approach you without being like, oh, how are you? Or, oh, you're really strong for getting through this. And I think I kind of have a little resentment too, that people always want to be like, oh, you're so strong, because I feel like if anyone was put in the situation that I am in right now, like, they would get through it just like I'm getting through it. Like, I don't feel like I'm this extra special person. So, like, in a way, I kind of am glad we're not talking as much, because, like, I don't want to hear that. But then, like, I also think in general, right now in the world, like, people aren't talking as much because of coronavirus. Because, like, when you start the conversation, like, everyone's doing nothing right now. Everyone's at home. Everyone's, like, staying away from each other, social distancing. So I don't think in the grand scheme of things, it's really affecting my friendships that much, because I think in general, people aren't talking to each other that much right now. Relationships, I will say, like, like I mentioned in the other questions, like, I was kind of spending time with someone before all of this. But, like, once I realized how long treatment would last, I kind of told them, like, do your thing. Now, going through this, like, I'm kind of over that situation anyway. And I feel like it's going to be weird dating after this also. So it is what it is. But that's the impact I feel it's had so far. Cheers. The next question is, what have you learned about yourself during this journey? I think the main thing that I've learned about myself is that I'm a lot more positive than people give me credit for, or at least some people. People tend to say that, oh, I come across harsh, and I do. I do. But in general, I am a really positive person, and I've learned too that a lot of people actually do see it. Like, when I went to the dentist right before I started treatment, like, I had to tell them, obviously, and they were like, oh, I've always really liked your attitude, like, you got this kind of thing. And a lot of people have been saying that to me, like, people that have known me growing up, people that know my parents, like, a lot of them have been saying that they really appreciate my positivity. And I think that that's something that, I've learned about myself, because I've never thought that I was negative, but I think I always kind of thought that I was more neutral. Probably because, like, I really stayed at home and stuff like that. But, I am really learning about my positivity. Even though I have a resentment when people say it, I guess I'm also learning, like, how much I can handle. Because in general, this situation is a lot to handle. And, I'm learning how much I can really deal with. Another thing is that, I'm learning that I have to be more forgiving of myself in my journey as it pertains to childbearing, because this will really, like, make you think, like, do I really want to do that? Is that really in my future? Because, like, you have to confront it. Simply, you just have to, because the chemo could take that all away from you. So you have to decide, am I going to put something in place to preserve that? So it's like stuff like that I'm learning about myself. I think I'm also learning that I am a lot more stringent on people than I would have previously admitted. Like, if people aren't really into what I'm into, like, I'm not really into that. So that's something that I am learning on this journey. The next question is, has it impacted your spiritual life, and how? So this is a very complex question for me. or no, I wouldn't say complex. I would say it's more of a question that like strikes something in me, because that is one thing that I have been talking about a lot with the people that I do actually talk to. I feel like initially after my diagnosis, I was probably the most spiritual that I have been in my lifetime, because I felt at the time, and I still do, but I felt like everything happened for a reason and at a good time for me to be able to handle it mentally, financially, familially, like with my family, with my relationships, with my friendships, like the way that I have and had been supported at the time. Like I felt like it really came full circle in a lot of my friendships and relationships, and I felt like I was in a good place to deal with what I was about to be going through. So, you know, around the diagnosis and right after, before I started treatment, I felt personally that I was the most spiritual that I have been. And for that time, like, it felt necessary. It felt like what I needed. However, as the journey has continued, like right now, I am 6 chemos in. That spiritual life has waxed and waned. I'll be honest. I feel like spirituality and religion is such a personal thing, and I don't necessarily want input from other people. Like it's fine for them to say like, oh, I'm praying for you, or to even send me Bible verses. Like some people have been sending Bible verses. Like it's okay if they ask like, hey, do you want a devotional, etc. Like stuff like that I am okay with, you know, because a lot of that you will do in your personal sphere, but other things I'm not so okay with is like people have said stuff to me like, oh, at this time in your life, like you need to be the, like basically you have to always have your eye on God, like begging for healing kind of thing. And I don't know how to feel about that. So it has been a struggle. I will admit it has been a struggle. So as like I said, as the journey goes, like that part is the part that I struggle with the most, because in some way it's like, well, God gave me this, but then you also have people saying like I should be begging God for healing, and it's like, well, why did he do it in the first place kind of thing. And initially and up until like I started really struggling with it, like I never questioned God about it, like why me, why did this happen to me. Like I just felt like it was something that happened and it was something I needed to get through. That's it. But the more people kind of forced their feelings of how I should feel spiritually as I go through this, the more I struggled with my own. So that's where I am right now. And you know, it is a struggle, and it is something that I talk to a lot with people, and it's something that I journal about. And truly it is something that I have cried more about than actually having breast cancer. So that's what I'll say about that. What's the hardest part of your journey so far? The answer to the previous question, that's probably the hardest part, if I am being honest. I think the next hardest part would probably have been like the first 4 chemos, specifically the first one, and then me ending up in the hospital after that. But that's maybe, or you know, I think maybe the fact that coronavirus is at the same time as me having breast cancer, that's probably the hardest part, because like now I have this additional worry, like is my surgery gonna be pushed back? Is any part of my treatment plan gonna be pushed back? Like no one can come visit me anymore, and that sucks. No one could come with me to chemo anymore. Like I have to go by myself now. So, you know, between those two are probably the hardest part so far.
Thanks again for watching. Stay tuned for the next part of my Q&A.